This person cites a reference in 2 Samuel that credits a different person as the one who killed Goliath. Have some stories been reworked to feature David as the hero?
Yeah, the king gets to take all your stories. So this is a great question, a super technical one as well, like Scott said. So yes, absolutely. We do think that might be what's happening. Now, we are speculating a little bit, but there's actually a lot of different examples of this. So there's this one. It's a little nebulous exactly what's happening in the passage that's being referred to. I can't remember the actual verse off the top of my head, but if you Google it, you'll find it. It's not quite clear that it's giving credit to another person, but it could be doing that in the original language. But this is what we think, consensus as scholars. But I'll give you another example here. I mentioned today that David is the 8th son. The writer here is making a point. 7 sons have gone through. The story is completed. Oh, wait, there's even more to God. Well, the writer of 2 Chronicles, or I think it's 1 Chronicles, comes along and says David was the 7th son. Because David is the completion of the story. He's the one who's the perfect son we've been looking for. As a retelling of the story from a slightly different perspective to make a slightly different point. And this is happening in the 2 books of Samuel, 2 books of Kings, and 2 books of Chronicles all the time. Chronicles is written after the Babylonian exile. It looks back on the story with very rose-colored glasses. The kings were great. That was the high point in our history. And so stories where the kings dropped the ball get turned into stories where the kings were faithful and they're good. And you can look them up and you can read one version of a story of David and you can read another story in Chronicles and see how different they are. So the same thing is happening all these different times where stories are told, they are retold with slightly different emphasis, and possibly in this one, credit is given to a character that we're trying to prop up and build up. But this is the complexity of dealing with ancient texts that are written not just hundreds of years ago, but are written and compiled over hundreds of years themselves, right? Because they're written, they're collected, they're gathered, they're redacted, they're combined together in different ways, and things are shifting in them. And this is a whole area of study that we call source criticism. What is the original text? What was the original story? It's a fascinating area of study, but I will say this with one last caveat on this answer. We just don't know a lot of the time. And so when you read scholars, listen to their argument, take it and ingest it and say, does that make sense to me? It's good for us to interrogate the Bible that way. But the fact is, all we have is the text that has been passed down to us. We don't have the original versions. We don't know what those stories were in another form at another time. This is the text that God has preserved. This is the text that the Hebrew people said, this encapsulates our story. And this is the text from which our understandings of Jesus are born. So I love text criticism, and I will talk about it a lot in sermons. But at the same time, understand that the power of Scripture is in the story that's been passed down to us, not in our fighting about the technicalities.
I think there is just something we can see in your answer, Jer, in terms of our relationship with the text. I think it's so to grow with the text as your understanding continues to grow, and to appreciate a perspective that is always opening the text rather than reducing it. I think I've said that a number of times in this setting, actually, that there can be a point in your relationship with the scriptures where you're like, well, is it this or isn't it? And if it isn't, then do I need to let it go? And like the answer is no. Like that, you get to continue to hold the complexity of the text, and it's still, every one of those stories that seems to contradict itself still offers you something deep when it comes to the evolution of your own faith, and I'd say the evolution of your own soul. So continue to open it up. Don't be afraid of that. That's a normal part of our journey. It can feel scary, but I promise you your faith can still hold.
Do you think there is one great shedding of the armor that wasn't meant for you, or that there will be multiple armors that you'll have to shed?
Sure.
You go for a second, because I want to...
I think it's a really fascinating one. And there's so much in this story, and I kind of had to pick and choose a few moments along the way to riff on. I kind of hinted at it at the end there, whereas like he sheds the armor that wasn't meant for him. I just didn't have time to add a bit of a riff here. But I think this is a really neat part of the story, right? So whatever our Goliath is, whatever our giant, our dragon is that we're going to face, even when we've demonstrated, hey, look, this is my experience. This is how I built myself up. This is a leap, but I know I can make it because of what I've experienced. There's always going to be someone who's going to come along and say, well, you're not enough. You need my coaching. You need my armor. You need my way of doing it. Here's how I think you should go. And we never want to get into a place where we're not willing to listen to wisdom around us. But there comes a point where we say, no, I know who I am, and I know what I've experienced, and I know what I've learned, and this is the direction that I'm going to go. If you want me to take on this challenge, you got to let me take it on. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to fail at that, and that's okay, because then you're going to learn more, and you're going to be better equipped the next time. But I really think there is this narrative beat in the story. It has nothing to do, like we were talking about, with the technicalities of what happened to David. This is very much a literary beat in the story, where the writer is saying, there's going to come a time when you're going to have to go your own path, and someone's going to want you to do it their way. And you're going to have to say, thanks, but no thanks. I love it. Very cool. Thank you.
I like your pull toward sort of thinking about the metaphor of the armor, and to kind of pull us back to the metaphor of Goliath a little bit and doing something similar. I think that there is this sort of cycle that the Goliath can take in our lives in terms of like what we will stare down, the kind of pain and fear and loss that will try to intimidate us to become more like it, put on more armor, armor up, certainly protect yourself. And the beauty of the invitation to me, anyways, if I just speak personally, is if I'm facing a certain pain, I'm always asked by that pain, who will you be? Will you become a version of the pain? Will you become a uglier version of yourself? Or will your relationship with death, loss, pain, mean something more vulnerable, something quite paradoxical to many of the ways we're told we need to sort of protect ourselves? Will you kind of empty that, shed that, and see what strength is really here? And the ongoing development of who we will be. So I think that's, again, these stories, they have all these technicalities, but it's just a boy and a giant, a bully, who can't relate to that? Some force in our lives that is going to say, show me your strength, and you just are like, I don't have it. I don't. And there you find yourself, in the story.